All those who demand peace from us ignore the fact that the price of our peace will be higher than the price of our war.
It seems to me that for Donald Trump and his inner circle, ending the war is a priority, regardless of whose expense it comes at. Moreover, he appears to interpret the concept of peace through strength as applying strength against the victim of Russia's invasion, rather than against the initiator of the Russian-Ukrainian war. That is why I believe that, for Donald Trump, the most important thing is to report to his voters and supporters that he has supposedly managed to bring the war to an end. But at whose expense? Probably, both for him and for his entourage and for his supporters, this is generally a secondary issue.
Hello, my name is Kateryna Soliar, and here will be no usual countdown of time, because here as in a vacuum only one time is frozen 24 hours left. And all this time, we seem to be on a roller coaster. One moment, we're lifted up by Trump's new promises to help Ukraine, the next, we're plunged down because the US wants an unreasonably high price for that help. So unreasonably high that even Marine Le Pen herself has criticized the US decision to halt military aid to Ukraine. The leader of France's right-wing National Rally Party called the move brutal and cruel.
This is a cruel move against Ukrainian soldiers who are patriotically defending their country.
Yes, this is the same Marine Le Pen who, after 2014, repeatedly expressed support for the Kremlin. In particular, she stated that the results of the referendum in Crimea were beyond doubt, and during the annexation of the peninsula, it was representatives of Le Pen's political force who acted as observers. And now she says that no one can force the United States to continue its support if Washington is no longer willing to do so. Because while arms supplies can be replaced, the suspension of intelligence support will be far more critical. It seems this is one of those rare moments when even Putin's staunchest supporters are shocked by the new Putin supporters. I don't think the world has ever seen anything quite like this. And such a thing had never been heard before. Trump's speech in Congress set a new record for length. At least it wasn't on a Friday. The address was scheduled for 9:10 p.m. Washington time, 4:10 a.m. in Kyiv, and was expected to become a defining moment, dividing history into before and after. Insider reports indicate Trump planned to announce he no longer recognizes Zelenskyy as Ukraine's leader and won't negotiate with him. This explains reports of planned democratic protests aiming to block the podium, as well as Trump's warning that anyone who takes to the streets in protest or expresses disagreement with the president's position would face either deportation from the country or expulsion from educational institutions without the right to complete their studies.
Members of Congress and senators showed up with signs, banners, and even T-shirts that read, "No place for kings, Elon Musk steals, Trump is illegitimate," and many others in a similar style. One congressman was even removed from the chamber for saying that Trump was unfit for the job, citing 2 impeachments, 34 criminal cases, and arguing that cutting medical aid was unacceptable. He was specifically referring to Medicaid, a program that provides assistance to the most vulnerable and low-income Americans. The congressman, a Democrat from Texas, stood firmly against its cancellation. But Speaker Mike Johnson ultimately called security to have him removed. Of course, these are just details. What matters most to us is what was said about Ukraine and whether last night's urgent letter had any impact.
I remind you what kind of letter it is. It's a letter from President Zelenskyy, in which he reaffirmed Ukraine's commitment to peace and outlined the key points Ukraine is ready to start with.
I received an important letter from President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. There he states that Ukraine is ready to sit at the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. He said that no one wants peace more than the Ukrainian people. Zelenskyy wrote, "My team and I are ready to work under the strong leadership of President Trump to achieve a lasting peace. We truly appreciate everything America has done to help Ukraine preserve its sovereignty and independence. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter. I received it recently. At the same time, we have had serious discussions with Russia, and everyone has received strong signals that they, too, are ready for peace. That would be great.
This confused and reshuffled Trump's cards. Although as Ukraine's ambassador to the US Oksana Markarova pointed out, it wasn't actually a letter but rather a social media post, but it still reached its intended recipient. And that is what matters most. So yes, Trump did talk about Ukraine, but not first and foremost. Overall, President Donald Trump's speech in Congress set a new record for length. He spoke for 1 hour and 39 minutes. The man loves breaking records. This time, Trump focused on what he called the achievements of his new administration, which has been in office for just over a month. According to him, his main successes include reversing Biden-era policies on gender issues, electric vehicles, climate change regulations, and even banning paper straws. Yes, Trump actually issued an order against them, calling them ineffective and demanding their removal. He also proudly highlighted the U.S. withdrawal from international agreements such as the Paris Climate Accord, the termination of WHO membership, and the achievement of the lowest level of illegal migration in the country. Additionally, Trump lavished praise on the Department of DOGE, led by Elon Musk, boasting about cutting off massive financial flows that, in his words, had been going to the wrong places all this time. And, as Trump put it, he will make America rich again by increasing tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, a key part of his political agenda.
Tariffs are what will help make America rich again and make America great again. And it's already happening. It will happen quite quickly. There will be some outrage, but we're okay with that.
Let me remind you that the day before, Trump announced a trade war and imposed tariffs ranging from 10 to 25% on exports of goods and electricity from Europe and China. In response, they, unsurprisingly, reacted in a similar manner.
Trump imposed tariffs on Canada. What did Canada do to deserve this? Trudeau is always in a suit and very polite. Canada itself is the most vegetarian country in the world. But for some reason, Trump wants something from them that no one has quite understood yet, and that's why he's creating chaos. Meanwhile, his top economic advisor at the White House claims that the issue with Canada isn't a trade war, but a drug war. Of course, everyone knows about those famous and ruthless Canadian drug cartels.
China also reacted to Trump's new tariffs, stating its readiness for any type of war with the US. If war is what the United States wants, whether it's a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we are ready to fight to the end, said the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I can't say yet whether he will succeed, because at the moment, everything seems to be geared toward not making the United States richer, but making the entire world poorer. And against this backdrop, the situation in the US is supposed to appear better. The information I've encountered and that I trust indicates that the situation in the US will worsen, and these steps will lead to a counterproductive effect. How quickly they will realize this, I don't know. How long they can endure this situation, maybe they will push through, but it's likely they'll have to offer greater concessions than the United States is willing to make, simply to outlast their opponents. So, even talking about allies is off the table. Trump appoints opponents everywhere. I don't know. The worst-case scenario I see is that Trump fails, and he will try to put out the economic fire with military methods.
As they said in China, we are also ready to fight under any conditions, even if it means suspending aid. Trump has kept the ban on the supply of weapons or any significant assistance to Ukraine, including intelligence support. Interestingly, Trump halted military aid to Ukraine at the very moment when the armed forces began successfully counterattacking in Donbas. Moreover, the Ukrainian military lost access to data that would allow them to strike deep into Russian territory. And here, too, we showed some progress. It seems like we've seen something similar before. If the situation repeats itself, it's hard to call it a coincidence.
When the first pause in supply was organized for 6 months, we had intense battles for Avdiivka. And after Avdiivka, let's say, fundamentally. Avdiivka was a very fortified area, which we had defended for many years, including at the final stage of the war. And when this kind of pause was organized, our artillerymen ran out of shells. And artillery in general is a means that destroys up to 80% of the target of ground enemies, draws attention. That is, the action of artillery, multiple launch rocket systems and barrel artillery is very important. And when this happens, it's very difficult to organize actions accordingly, including defense. Unfortunately, the enemy managed to capture Avdiivka with heavy losses, and moreover, after that, they started advancing even further, towards Okhrytino and beyond. These are the consequences of such actions and the timing in which they occurred.
So, they say the pause will continue until Trump understands that Zelensky supports peace talks with Russia. At least, that's what the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are reporting.
First, it's the signing of the agreement. It hasn't happened yet. Both sides have said they will sign it. I believe that once the agreement is signed, we can expect a thaw and the transfer of weapons. I don't think there will be new programs or any escalation, but we can expect a thaw in what already exists and the fulfillment of the commitments made earlier, which were already mentioned by Trump's team. All speakers from the Trump team are not talking about stopping or ending support for Ukraine, but are talking about a pause and a temporary break in the provision of support. This is also very revealing. It shows that a significant part of Trump's team is in favor of restoring that support. However, they will not go against Trump's war, and it's clear that he makes the final decision. Of course, there is Vance and similar pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian figures around him, who will obviously advocate for the lack of support for Ukraine. But the internal political situation in the US is such that Trump won't be able to drag this out for long, as the division within the Republican Party is growing.
So, the logic of Trump's peace process seems to be as follows. First, a ceasefire, then, discussions about guarantees, in which Europeans must play a serious role. During the ceasefire, the possible restoration of democratic processes, including elections, after which the new government would sign a peace agreement. To ensure the ceasefire, Trump has incentives for Moscow. Don't get it twisted, a stick for Ukraine and a carrot for Moscow. Large-scale economic cooperation and the lifting of sanctions. The logic of the peace process from the Ukrainian government's perspective is based on the fact that after a ceasefire, there are no guarantees that hostilities won't resume, so the US must first provide those guarantees, then take Ukraine into NATO, and only after that, engage in talks with Moscow. The US option for Ukraine doesn't revolve around whether Ukraine agrees or not to a ceasefire, but rather that either the war continues without American support, or perhaps the war will resume sometime after the ceasefire, with uncertain US support. As you understand, there's no perfect option for Ukraine right now. There never is in world politics. There are only better and worse options to choose from. And, as you understand, choosing must be done with emotions, hysteria, betrayal, victory, and panic pushed aside. It's about pure logic, numbers, and cold reason. So here we are again, approaching the agreement that the US is offering to Ukraine. The agreement on natural resources, or agreements, considering how many were offered to us. The first proposal was more like a conquistadors, Inca, deal. Ukraine resists, the agreement is hollowed out, Trump agrees to sign it. But then there was a scandal in the Oval Office. Completely by accident, of course. Because up until that point, the agreement was supposedly already agreed upon and prepared for signing. But now everything indicates that we're entering a new phase. Of course, no one dismisses the idea that perhaps Trump wants to offer us better terms, including security guarantees and military aid, which he promised at the start of his meeting with President Zelensky. But all of this suspiciously resembles the stories of all Trump's previous business negotiations, where it doesn't matter if you're in a suit or not, what matters is how well you can resist pressure. That means no public quarrels, no public opposition, and of course, involving the EU in the negotiations.
One of the reasons, which we discussed earlier, for why Trump reacted the way he did to what happened in the Oval Office. Although, I believe the meeting actually started quite well. If you watch it carefully, if you really pay attention, Trump welcomed Zelenskyy very well. He even promised him weapons. If you listen carefully to what he said, "You're really good guys," and so on. After that, I think the president should still use a translator. The thing is not about knowing the language you speak, right? It's that you always have the time to think about what is being said to you. At least, you get a slight advantage. When you know the language, you know, often many high-ranking officials, even if they know the language, still bring a translator with them. Because while the person says something, you've already heard it, and by the time it gets translated, you've already had time to think and have an advantage in the negotiations. You know this, as in that joke about the old man. The grandfather was deaf. He was given a hearing aid. He is told, "How do you like the hearing aid?" And he said, "Great, you know, I have already rewritten the Testament 3 times."
Therefore, France and the UK may be involved in the process. French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are ready to accompany Zelenskyy to Washington as early as next week. The spokesperson for the French government, Sophie Primas, confirmed that such a trip is being considered. She did not specify the exact date, but mentioned that it is expected to take place in the near future. According to the French government spokesperson, France is working to restore communication between the United States and Ukraine in order to achieve long-lasting and strong peace. But you know what keeps me from completely losing hope in this situation? You. People from around the world who raised $3 million for the Ukrainian army in just 2 days. This was their response to the results of the negotiations in the White House. "Ukraine, you're not alone," echoed from every video message supporting our people on social media, and former Commander-in-Chief Zaluzny showed hundreds of letters that had been sent to the Ukrainian embassy in the UK. During this time, hundreds of donations were sent to the fundraising company's accounts. The largest number of donations came from the United States, $1.5 million. 168,000 from the UK, 120,000 from Canada, and also from Germany, Sweden, France, the Netherlands, Finland, Australia, Switzerland, Denmark, Norway, Ireland, Belgium, Italy, China, Spain, Austria, Poland, New Zealand, and other countries, where the donations were smaller. But they added up to $114,000. You know, people, you're incredible. And we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all your support. Knowing that you're not alone in this world, that's important. And, of course, don't lose momentum, keep supporting justice, and we will see you. We'll see you in 24 hours, the countdown of which has already begun.